Again, my name is Nicole Terry, and welcome to the Post-COVID Escape. What does travel look like now? So I'll start off by introducing myself. So professionally, I work at Pratt & Whitney. I'm the Deputy Director for our Business Acquisition Center of Excellence. So I deal with military proposals. I'm also the president of our Women's Council ERG in a professional sense. And personally, I'm the owner and CEO of Red Chuck Chronicles LLC, which is a travel company that I started. I'm also a travel podcast host, which I started over COVID. So I'm very passionate about the topic of travel. I love to travel, and I've also traveled to over 40 countries. I have a short poll that I would like to put out, a couple of questions, just to kind of get a feel for who we have in the room, and maybe that will help us as we go throughout this conversation. So Nick, if you can bring up the poll questions.
Those should be up.
We'll give it about 20 more seconds for those who haven't voted yet. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And as you can see, we have some avid travelers in the room. So people who have traveled both domestically and internationally. Also, you travel maybe 2 to 3 times per year. So a lot of travelers here, and those who are looking to get right back out there and traveling. I don't know if it's for business purposes or if it's for pleasure or leisure, but you're looking to actually get back out there this year. So that's a good thing. Thank you for participating. And also, again, as Nick stated, feel free to drop any questions that you might have in the chat. He will be monitoring that as well. And Nick, feel free to ask the questions as we go. So as I stated, I'm an avid traveler, and as some of you are in this room, when COVID hit, it kind of put a halt to everything, right? So in 2020, we saw that, there was about a 42% annual decline, nearly $50 billion from what was happening in 2019. And that was a drastic shift and drastic change, and impacted a lot of different economies, including the United States, but internationally as well. And then also you had the international travel dip, right? And businesses suffering. So I've been impacted or seeing the impact in both professionally from a company, because Pratt & Whitney makes aerospace engines. So we provide commercial engines as well as military, so we were impacted in that sense. And then business travel fell from 70% travel compared to 27% for leisure. So a big dip on both sides, more business from an international perspective. And then also that the pandemic heavily impacted travel economies of every state and territory, right? So airlines, hotel, hospitality, restaurants, tour companies, travel agents, you have your local vendors, and whole communities were impacted, especially those regions and areas of the world where tourism is big and huge for their economies. Additionally, right, since the beginning of March, right, prior to COVID, tourism had become one of the most important sectors in the world economy, accounting for about 10% of the global GDP and more than 320 million jobs worldwide. So that was a drastic shift where everything came to a halt in March. And it's resulted in about 492 billion in cumulative losses for the US alone, equating to a daily loss of approximately 1.6 billion for the past 10 months. So just, putting that into some kind of perspective, is one thing to think about how it's impacting us individually or personally, having to stay in your home for those periods of time, but it also has a huge impact on our economy. The continual depressed levels of travel spending has caused a loss of 64 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenue since March 1st as well. And many of these micro, small, and medium-sized economies greatly were impacted by the pandemic, and they employed a high share of women. So a lot of women were impacted by this as well. Women represented about 54% of the tourism workforce, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization. So also keep that in perspective as well. It's not just economies over large, but a lot of households were impacted where women may have been bringing in or being the breadwinner of their families. Now they're impacted by this. And for some countries, the pandemic has crippled them so that their economies, as they survive heavily on tourism, in some cases, they don't anticipate the recovery happening until 2023. And it may not even happen fully then. So what does it look like for post-COVID travel? So what are the predictions? What are you thinking? Like, I'd be interested to, some of you have said you already want to start traveling in 2021. So we're halfway through the year. Maybe you've already started to travel. What does that look like? They're predicting that after months of people having cabin fever and just wanting to be out the house. And I know for those of us who are in the Northeast, the weather is nice. People are out, restrictions are starting to be lifted. Some people are vaccinated. So what does that look like? And they're saying that more people are going to be doing conscious travel. So more people are going to be about the journey and willing to be away from home a little bit longer and more appreciative of their surroundings. So then when you do get out there, maybe you travel in a different way than you did prior to COVID happening, right? And then there's ecotourism. So travelers who are looking to be a little bit more careful about the way they travel, they're looking and seeking out hotels and travel companies that are doing everything they can to minimize the impact on the planet. And then you may have those who are looking for an opportunity to, dip into the wellness tourism aspect, because again, we have been in the home for quite some time during this global pandemic. So maybe you're looking to go out and explore detox opportunities or boot camps or retreats or trips that will leave you feeling better than when you went, and so that you can return home refreshed and renewed. And then there's also escapism, a strong desire to travel to a place that is familiar. So maybe you're not ready to get back out there in the world. Maybe you're not ready so much to leave the country, but more so you just want to get out and do something. So you might go to a familiar destination, you might stay closer to home. Maybe you'll do an Airbnb. I actually did that over COVID. During COVID last year, I rented an Airbnb with some friends. We made sure everyone was, tested and safe, and we had a great time. So there were opportunities for you to do that, but people may be doing more of that until they feel comfortable or until they get to a comfort level where they feel like they can get back out in the world and things are safe. According to Expedia, travel trends reports conducted in December, it found that 46% of people said that they'd be more likely to travel when a vaccine became widely available. We know that that has been rolled out and is starting to be rolled out. My question is it going to become mandatory? Like the yellow fever vaccine or some other vaccines that are necessary for you to travel into certain countries in the world. Is that something that is going to happen going forward? So those are some things just to look out for. I would also say that some post-COVID travel tips and considerations for you to have. So do your research, right? You want to understand the requirements, where you're headed. Will you have to quarantine? Because that is the case in some countries. Will you have to quarantine? Will you have to take a test upon arrival? will you have to take a test coming back? What are some of the rates of COVID, positivity in the country that you may be visiting? Or are you going to go to a secluded island and lay on the beach for some fun and sun? Do you have to have proof of vaccination? I talked about that a little bit earlier. Get travel insurance. This is one that actually a lot of people maybe didn't even do prior to COVID. This was something that I had started a practice of and habit of getting travel insurance when I was out of the country. I actually would get an annual policy, and that was to not just cover for a loss of flight, cancellation, or lost luggage, but actually my health. So if I went out and maybe there was a car accident that happened, or maybe I got sick when I was out of the country, there are companies that you can go research online and actually get a yearly annual travel policy insurance, and it's not expensive, and it'll cover you for travel outside of the United States. I would say make reservations in advance. That is also something that is good. If you're booking via travel agent or via travel platform, make them in advance, and consider alternatives such as Airbnbs, as I mentioned previously as well. Instead of maybe staying in a crowded hotel, if you're still not comfortable, you don't have that comfort level just yet, that is an option for you and your family or whoever you may be traveling with. You want to book your flight early. Flight prices are on the rise. If you have not been already out there checking, there were a lot of deals during COVID, but now as things are starting to open back up, flight prices are going through the roof. So just making sure that you're booking in advance. I'd also recommend that you understand what the COVID stipulations are. I think some airlines still have an opportunity for you maybe to cancel depending on what might happen with the country that you may be going to or where you may be traveling if there's some issues based on COVID. And then be flexible, right? So you want to make sure that when you're traveling, there are many things that are not in your control, such as your itinerary, flight delays, weather changes, sickness. You should be open to the possibilities that things won't go exactly the way that you planned it, and leave room for that change and just flow with it, right? It'll make for a much better vacation and relaxed time. Are there any questions to my travelers out there and those who are traveling in 2021 and have already traveled? Do you have any tips or questions? Or
I have a question. What are you seeing in terms of business travel? What are companies from where you sit? What are you seeing? My first trips are going to be business trips. I'm just curious
okay.
what companies are thinking.
Yeah, I think it depends on the company, but in my company, I think it's by exception, right? Like there's still things in place in terms of the necessity of it. I don't know that business travel will recover fully to the way that it was before, because I think businesses have realized over this last year and a half, 18 months, that you can still conduct certain meetings that maybe previously you would have just gone, to see the customer, or maybe you don't have to do that. So I think there will still be some kind of scale back approach in general, but companies are starting to get back out there, and some never stopped. I mean, they slowed down, but they never fully stopped. So,
Thanks.
mm-hmm. Any other questions?
I wanted to find out more about the travel insurance. I've always been wary of it in the past, so thanks for sharing that. I only thought about it in case of cancellations, to be quite honest with you. But as far as the like what they cover, and are they legitimate? Like, or do they have tons of exceptions that
No,
yeah.
No, they are legitimate. And I found out about them in a travel group, one of the many travel groups that I'm a part of, on social media platforms. And people have had cases, extreme cases, where they, may have been in a car accident and they had to evacuate people. I've been on group trips where it's been a requirement to have the travel insurance, and it does cover things like that, like evacuation from the country if you need it, hospital stay. I mean, you can get up to $300,000 to $500,000 of worth of coverage. So it is good if you're doing. I think there's sometimes a difference, like if you're going to do adventurous sports, more risky types of vacation or travel, you have to notify them or say that when you're getting the policy. But just your everyday normal, I got sick while I was out of the country and I had to go to the hospital, that's typically covered, those types of things. Or I got injured, due to no fault of my own while I was in another country and I need to go to the hospital. Because a lot of countries, if you get sick over there, obviously your US medical insurance is not going to cover you at all. And you're going to typically have to pay out of pocket, or they want to know that you're insured and that you're covered somehow so that they're going to get their money before they will take care of you. So.
I'm going to investigate it. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing. I'll probably be looking at a family policy too, because we usually travel as a family. But
it's definitely
that's good to know.
security. It's definitely, I didn't think about it either. But again, like I said, the cost is not expensive. You can get it if you don't travel as frequently. You don't have to get the annual plan. You can just get a per country or per trip plan. I've done that as well, but then I was traveling quite a bit. So I just ended up getting one plan for the entire year, and it covered any country that I went to outside the United States.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So you can get both the health insurance piece as well as the trip cancellation piece under one policy?
Yes, it's included in one policy, correct.
Oh, great, thank you.
You're welcome. No, that is a big thing that a lot of people don't know, and I think it's very important because anything can happen. So,
Just want to say out loud, Karen, I'm ready for the Caribbean vacation. I'm just say the word. We'll make a group trip.
Listen, I see some nice Caribbean beach in my future, relaxing with some good food, and American beaches do not do it right now.
No, absolutely. And my last trip, for being an avid traveler, my last trip that I went on out of the country was to Costa Rica in January of 2020. And so I was okay throughout 2020, but now I'm kind of getting the itch where I want to get back out there. I'm definitely due to sit on a Caribbean beach somewhere.
Yeah, my kind of living.
I'm even ready to go visit my in-laws at this point, right?
Yeah.
But the Caribbean sounds a lot more fun than going to visit the in-laws. I'll put it that way.
Desperation. It is. You cannot beat it.
Yes. And so during the quarantine, I started back in March, I started a podcast. It's called the Red Chuck Chronicles. It's all things travel related. I release every Thursday at 7 p.m. So tonight's episode is about traveling domestically with a group of friends, so a girls trip. But it's on all podcast platforms. I have my social media contact here. Feel free to follow me. I have more tips and episodes specifically on tips around insurance and some of the things that I talked about, but I dive into a little bit more detail. So, are there any questions or other things that anyone wants to share or talk about? Oh yes, and the red chucks. That comes from my shoes.
Oh.
Yeah, so I would often wear red Chuck Taylors when I would travel. And I was in Johannesburg, South Africa on a Sunday morning, headed to an elephant sanctuary, and the name just popped in my brain. It initially started as a blog, and now I have a podcast. So.
I love it. I have a question. So most of our travel is about family. We're family from all over the globe. My daughter-in-law is French Algerian. She has family in England, France, and Algiers. My family is all in Italy. And so my concern is, not concern, but I guess it is, my anxiety is we'll start to travel. Like I plan on going to Italy as soon as they let us back in without having to quarantine for 14 days because we have stuff to do. Right. But what if while we're overseas, something pops up? The pandemic takes this horrible turn and suddenly, and we're in lockdown. Have you found any of the embassies or any of our national offices helpful in that way? Are you anticipating that they have I doubt they have a plan, but do they have a plan?
I have heard of, so I was actually supposed to be in India on a trip right when everything started shutting down in 2020, but I had previously decided to not go. And I know people who were on that trip. And I think that they did, work with the embassy to try to make sure that they can get back in the country, because that's when the US was saying that we were going to start to close the borders. But I believe we left it open so that our citizens could come back home. I think the only issues have been that I've heard of where the country itself was closed, their borders, so they weren't allowing flights out. And so that's where people were running into problems. I heard of people getting stuck in the Maldives. I don't know that's the worst place to be stuck, but I would assume if you have a job to get back to and you did not have your work computer or things with you, that might become an issue, but they're a worse place to be stuck. So I would think that you should be able to reach out to the embassy to get some kind of relief or help, or at least, maybe not initially, but once they do, maybe they would charter, if there were enough people in that country, stuck, charter something to allow for them to at least leave to get back to their home country.
I had family members who were stuck in different parts, and just like you said, some of the countries were not accepting flights, so they couldn't get in either way. Some were stuck here in the US, some were stuck other places. But I think even if they normally give a warning, because I had to bring my son home from Spain, for him to get in under that time frame. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just a matter of, just paying attention to the news, go have fun, and, be able to scamper when you need to scamper and get out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Definitely. Anyone else?
What's the last piece of advice you'd offer us as we get ready to go back out to travel? A personal tip. We must know this. What would that be?
You must know that if 2020 has taught you nothing else, you must know that you should go and enjoy life. There's a lot of world out there to see. There's so much to experience, and that you should enjoy it while you can, because in a moment's notice, it can be shut down.
Amen.
So.
True.
Live in the moment. I have one question.
Yes.
I have one question. So other than, bringing up the embassy, sounds like we should probably, if there's, this pandemic is still in play in some of these places, be able to know the contact information for the embassy and where they're located. But what other kinds of, local places should we research in advance?
That would be my best bet. And then the travel, there's usually like the US travel website that you can go to that kind of gives you information and warnings on different things like that. Just be up on that, have that ready. Make sure that your family members who are maybe back in the US know where you are, and have your information and staying in contact with them so that they can potentially help on this side to see what they can do.
So my son travels a lot. And what I found out from another friend of mine is there's an app called Life 360 that wherever they are in the world, I know where they are. You can track them. And he turns it off when he comes back stateside, so I'm not all up in his business. But like, he is planning a trip with he has 2 travel buddies, and they're planning a trip for France, Amsterdam, and something later this year. And I was clear with him, you're gonna reinstall that app, and we're gonna so that I know where you are in case of anything. So I just want that tidbit out there. Life 360.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's free. I don't pay for it. You can pay for more things, but but it's lovely also seeing him when he's going to different places in the world to see him up there. Anyway.
Hi.
Okay, so now we're just going to start wrapping it up. Thank you again, Nicole, for doing this. And thank you for everybody else joining and engaging in questions and in the chat and everything. It was really fun to see. I just posted the link to the event in the chat, so you guys can start heading on over there.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And this picture behind me is from Santorini. So
nice.
if you're ever in Santorini, Greece, they have beautiful sunsets. I took it. I was on the catamaran. So.
Nice.
Thank you so much. This was really great.
Thanks.